Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel The Social Pi. I am Ayan Khan and today in this video we are going to differentiate secant x, cosecant x and cotangent x using the definition of derivative. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so let's differentiate secant x. Okay, so we know, let's first know that is secant x. Okay, secant x is 1 upon cosine x. Okay, we will use this for differentiating. Now derivative of any function f of x can be expressed in a limit h tends to 0 f of x plus h minus f of x all over h. Okay, so if you plug secant x in place of f of x, that is derivative of secant x. Okay, so this is limit as h tends to 0 secant x plus h minus secant x all over h. Okay, now since secant x is 1 upon cosine x, right, so we can write it like 1 upon cosine x plus h minus 1 upon cosine x. Okay, cosine x all over h. Now we have a molecular fraction here. Now we need to multiply this both, so we get, multiply the denominators, we get cosine x plus h times cosine x. Subtracting, we need to subtract, so cosine x into 1, that's a cosine x. Cosine x plus h into 1, that is minus cosine of x plus h. Okay, all over h. Now from here we can bring this h to this denominator, so we'll get cosine x minus cosine x plus h all over h into cosine x plus h times cosine x. Okay, now from here we can expand cosine x plus h, right, so we'll get cosine x minus cosine x cosine h minus sin x sin x. Okay, now all over h times cosine of x plus h cosine of x. If we distribute this negative 1 here, negative 1, so we'll get cosine x minus cosine x cosine h plus sin x sin h all over h times cosine x plus h cosine x. Okay, now we can take cosine x common here, so we will get cosine x, and that is 1 minus cosine x here. Okay, this is cosine h, so because this is cosine x, so we will factor, so this will be, we will left with cosine h plus sin x sin h all over h times cosine x plus h times cosine x. Okay. Now we can split the fraction here. Let's see how. So if we now split the fraction here, we'll get 1 minus cosine h upon h into cosine x upon cosine x plus h times cosine x. Okay, and the rest part here, so this is sine h upon sine times sine x all over, this is still h upon h times cosine x plus h times cosine x. Okay, like this. Now we know that this limit 1 minus cosine h upon h, this is 0. The value of this limit is 0. Okay, so that means that 0 into cosine x upon cosine x plus h times cosine x, that is all 0. So this is 0. Now if we see in this part, there is sine h upon h, so this part is 1. Okay, this part is 1. Now if we see sine x upon cosine x, that's a tangent x, and we are left with 1 upon cosine x plus h. So 1 upon cosine x plus h, that is secant x plus h. Okay, now the limit was limit h tends to 0. So if we let h is equal to 0 now, we will get tangent x times secant x, and this is our answer. Now if we differentiate cosecant x, so first that cosecant x is 1 upon sin x. Okay, now if we differentiate this cosecant x, we have limit h tends to 0, that is cosecant x plus h minus cosecant x all over h. This is equals to 1 upon sin x plus h minus 1 upon sin x. Okay, all over h. So now if we combine these both fractions, we have a common denominator of sin x plus h times sin x, that is sin, in the denominator that is sin of x minus sin of x plus h all over h. Okay, here we can use a formula, that is sine of a minus sine of b. This is 2 cosine a plus b upon 2 times cosine a minus b upon 2. We can use this formula. So if we expand this using that formula, so this is 2 cosine, now the first input x plus x plus h, okay, upon 2 times cosine first input x minus second input x plus h, so that is minus x minus h all over 2. Okay, and upon this, so this is sine of x plus h times sine of x all over h. Okay, now this can be simplified. X minus x, that's 0. So this is 2 cosine of 2x plus h upon 2 cosine of negative h by 2 all over h will be multiplied here, so we get h into sine x plus h times sine x. Okay, now we can do some rearrangements. So first, 2 cosine, if we see 2x upon 2, that's simply x plus h by 2 all over, okay, let's remove 2 from here, that is sine x plus h sine x. Okay, if we have removed 2 from here, so we will multiply 2 here, 2 cosine negative h by 2 all over, we have taken h from here. Okay, like this. So we have this expression. We can actually bring 2 here because it's in multiplication. We can actually bring it down up in the denominator of h upon 2. Okay, so this becomes cosine of x plus h upon 2 all over sine of x plus h sine of x times cosine of, okay, here negative we can pull out, so this is minus h upon 2 all over h upon 2. Okay, this is the standard limit from calculus, so this will be 1. The value of this is 1. Okay, now if we let, since limit was h tends to 0, so if we let h is equal to 0, we can simplify this, so we get cosine of x upon sine h into sine h, that is sine square x, okay, times negative 1. So this is negative 1 upon sine x, okay, times cosine x upon sine x. Now 1 upon sine x, that's cosecant x, so we get negative cosecant x times cosine x upon sine x, that's cotangent x, so we get cotangent x, and this is our final answer. Okay, so let's differentiate cotangent x. We know that cotangent x is cosine x upon sin x. Okay, so if we differentiate it, cotangent x, we get limit as h tends to 0, cotangent x plus h minus cotangent x all over h. Okay, so that is, we can convert like this, so we get 1 upon, that is cosine x plus h upon sine x plus h minus cosine x upon sin x, okay, all over h. Now let's combine these both fractions, So we get in the denominator sin x plus h times sin x, and in the numerator sin x times cosine x plus h minus cosine x times sin x plus h. Okay, now if we remember, sine of a minus b, the formula for that is sine a cosine b minus cosine a sine b. Okay, and we see that same thing exactly here. Okay, where x is a and x plus h is b, so we can conclude that this is sine of x plus x minus x plus h. Okay, upon we have h here. Okay, so h times sine of x plus h times cosine x times sin x. Okay, now sine of x minus x, that's sine of h, and here we have h. Okay, sin h upon h times 1 upon sine of x plus h times 1 upon sine of x. Okay, also if we see here we had a negative sign. Okay, so we can have negative sign here also. Then x minus x is 0 and we have negative h, so this is negative h here. Okay, now sine of, now we can bring this negative h, negative 1 here from here out, so we get negative 1 into sine of h upon h times 1 upon sine of x plus h times 1 upon sine of x. Okay, this is 1. Okay, the value of sine of h upon h where limit tends to 0, so we have 1. And if we set the limit, if we set h equals to 0, we get negative 1 upon sine of x into sine of x. Okay, if we multiply this we get sine square of x, and negative 1 upon sine square of x, that's negative cosecant x, cosecant square of x. This is negative cosecant square of x. Okay, so this is our final answer. So guys, thanks for watching my channel. Please subscribe, like, share and comment. Thank you.